Hello, my name is Kelly from Kelly's Tutoring, and in today's video we're going to look at how we can encourage our children to pursue science. So what does science mean to you? You might have connotations of a mad scientist or a laboratory filled with weird and wonderful flasks and test tubes filled with vibrant, bright, eccentric colours. Or you might think of Albert Einstein. But what actually is the definition of science? Well, it could be understood as an approach to the way we view the world via observation and testing. According to the Science Council, the definition of science is the pursuit of knowledge and information and its application to the natural world and to society based on a systematic methodology that is rooted in observation. Now, how does that sound to you now? You might feel it sounds a bit dull and dreary, especially if your own experiences of science are negative. Perhaps at school you found it difficult. Perhaps at school you found the lessons boring and disengaging. In which case then it's going to colour the way you view and approach science. But that doesn't have to get in the way of nurturing a love for science in our children. Now, contrary to what we may feel or think, yes, it is an academic subject that requires study and research, but it's much more than that, which is why those who pursue the sciences are very passionate in what they do. And that is because it taps into a natural curiosity that children have. It taps into their imagination. Indeed, science requires a playfulness and an imaginative approach, and not just accepting things at face value, but testing and experimenting and experiencing it for themselves. So with that in mind then, why would you want to encourage your child to pursue science? Well, as stated, it actually taps into something very innate for children who tend to be quite playful and imaginative anyway. But it can also give them a sense of accomplishment, because with a job in science, it creates worthwhile, lasting changes in the world around us. It can indeed transform the way we view things. And actually, the career paths are so diverse. Yes, your child, if they studied science, could work in a lab. They could work in a research team, researching things such as life on other planets, or cures for cancer, or vaccines. But they could also, if they enjoy writing, write for scientific journals. They could become a broadcaster in science. They can work with governments in changing policies. They can help to come up with innovative solutions to world hunger and global poverty. They could also work with data analysis teams. So there's so much more than perhaps we initially first think. So then with that in mind, how can we foster a love of science in our children? Well, research has shown that actually parents, guardians, teachers, tutors, educated friends, family members all have a strong impact on encouragement of their child in the sciences. And that is because actually it's seen as more important than perhaps, media or, stories of scientists from the past. In fact, it is the close relatives and friends that inspire children a lot more. And that's perhaps because they see it as something that's part of their life rather than something separate and removed. On top of that, it comes from something within, so it comes from a natural curiosity and an innate wanting to understand what's going on around them. And again, as parents, as guardians, as family members, as teachers, tutors and educators, we can definitely help to sow the seeds of that love for science by exposing children to field studies, exposing them to to lab work or practical hands-on work. And there's research from the Pew Center research in a table that actually specifies and outlines the percentages in which people who studied science rated their reasons for pursuing it. And at the top was their own desire. And then underneath that was, experiencing it by going on field trips, lab work, then teachers and educators, tutors, parents, family members, mentors. And then actually the media had the lowest impact. So yes, although it's fantastic that we are seeing more scientists on TV, such as Brian Cox and Elon Musk, but that is not going to be the most influential reason for our children pursuing science. On top of that, there's actually a lack of diversity within the sciences. We are not getting the variety that the industry or the subject or the study deserves. There's still a lack of people from lower income backgrounds. There's still a lack of female presence in the scientific community and world. And therefore, by encouraging our children, no matter their background, no matter their socio-economic situation, it can help to bring and inject new life into this field. Maybe you're still thinking, well, maybe I can have an impact, but how? Well, one of the most powerful anecdotes that I read a few years back actually outlines a way in which we can, as adults, nurture a love of science in our children. A famous researcher was questioned by a journalist why he decided to take a career in science. And he said, when I was a small child, I was opening the fridge to get a bottle of milk, but I dropped it and the milk went everywhere on the floor. I created a huge mess. My mother walked in and I thought she would scold me or lecture me on how I should have asked for help or how I should have, got the milk out of the fridge. But instead, she laughed. She looked at the puddle of milk and said, Robert, I have never quite seen a huge puddle of milk on the floor before. What you have created here is a huge mess, and it is a failed experiment on how to get the milk bottle from the fridge. Would you like to spend a few minutes playing in it? And so he did. He played in the puddle of milk. Afterwards, she said, it is, appropriate to clean up your messes after they have been made. So what would you like to do to clean up this mess? Would you like to use a sponge, paper towels, or mop? And he chose a sponge. And so together they cleaned it up. But she didn't stop there. Afterwards, she said, let's go to the backyard and fill the milk bottle with water. And then you can discover ways in which you can lift and carry the milk bottle without dropping and spilling it. And so he did. And from that moment on, he was unafraid to make mistakes. He was unafraid to experiment and to test out ideas. And I think that's a powerful reminder of how the way we are with our children, the language we use, and whether we inspire them to be responsible agents in their lives or whether we take that away from them. So what does that look like then at home? So at home, what you can do to help sow the seeds of passion for science is perhaps you can collect cardboard boxes, cereal boxes or loo roll holders, the tubes, the cardboard tubes inside them. Perhaps you can ask a child to use that to create mazes so that they can work out ways in which they can put it together, different angles to create a maze. You can ask your children to look at how they can, practice using different materials. So for example, ask your child to prepare lunch. So they can, perhaps you're having a sandwich and you're buttering the bread, ask them to perhaps use a plastic knife, and then to note down how easy it was. Was it easy to scoop the butter out of its container? Was it easy to spread it on the bread? Then next day, perhaps ask them to use a metal knife. How does that, fare in comparison? Is it easier? If so, in what way? And then finally, perhaps the third day, ask them to use the back end of a spoon and to smear it that way. And again, rate how easy it was. And then to look at perhaps reasons why they found it easier, or was it the same? It might seem daft, but that line of inquiry can really help engage your child's curiosity and not just accept the standard way of doing things. It can actually help them to, spark, their creativity. Another thing you can do is, when you're out on walks with children, get them to notice the natural world around them. Ask them questions. So for example, if you see leaves that are green, perhaps not so much right now because of autumn, but blades of grass, what are the similarities and differences? And get your child to postulate as to why they are different. Look at, for example, if you have a pet, ask your child to observe the differences between the physicality of the pet and themselves. For example, I have a kitten, and maybe you can get them to look at the ears, how pointy they are, measure them in a nice, friendly manner, and then perhaps measure their own ears and see how they are different. By doing that, it just opens your child's mind to new ideas, new concepts, and gets them to look at things in a different manner. And then finally, engage with them in reading about science. So for example, you can go online and read articles that are appropriate for your child, so that it becomes part of the norm. So perhaps once or twice a week, trade in your fiction reading to some non-fiction. That can help just generate that interest in science in your child, because you have one of the greatest influences on your child in terms of science. So to conclude, science is much more than just an academic subject. It can change the way individuals view the world. It can bring change on societal level in terms of its approaches to poverty and hunger. It can create change globally by the use of research for medicines, for the use of technologies. And we as parents, guardians, teachers, tutors have a great responsibility in terms of exposing our children and students to science by making it engaging and opening up a line of inquiry with everything. So that way then our children, regardless of whether they decide to take a career in science, will actually at the very least have a very inquisitive mind, a playfulness, so that they don't just accept things at face value, but will look into it and will decide for themselves what they feel is true and what isn't, what works and what doesn't. If you have any questions, put them below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.